It is time for the Mississippi State and Florida preview show right here on the Stingray Show. The Bulldogs are coming into this ball game off of a much-needed bye week, and Florida comes in off of a loss to Texas A&M. Mississippi State has not beaten Florida since 2010, and that was the last time that Mississippi State played Florida in Gainesville. Florida has won 2 in a row against Mississippi State, both of those games in Starkville, 2018 and last year in 2024. We are going to be joined by Graham Hall of 247 Sports the Gators and by Steve Robertson, host of the Boneyard and Jeans page, to get a preview of Mississippi State and Florida right now on this edition of the Stingray Show.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
Welcome back inside the Stingray Show. We are doing a preview of Mississippi State and the Florida Gators, as this is the homecoming matchup for the Florida Gators in Gainesville. And Florida has beaten Mississippi State the last 2 times they have played, both in 2018 and last year in 2024. The last Mississippi State win, oddly enough, was in 2010 down in Gainesville, Florida. To break this game down from the Florida side, here is Graham Hall of 247 Sports, the Gators. Graham, how were things with you in Gainesville, Florida? And here we go again. Billy Napier knocked off Texas. Everybody's feeling good. Then they go on the road and they lose a game to Texas A&M, and we're right back to square one.
Well, I'm doing great. The weather here is getting cooler. The humidity's going away. I got no complaints. It's starting to feel like fall on the few times we get seasons here in Gainesville. But the Florida football program, not a lot for people to feel good about. You know, Billy Napier had said before the Texas A&M game that he was hopeful the win over Texas would be a multiplier rather than a letdown for the Gators. It was not that. It started off promisingly. Florida looked really methodical on that first 8-play, 75-yard drive. But the defense, which has been so impressive this season, gives up a 2-play, 75-yard drive, and all the momentum that you had just absolutely dissipated. The Gators did get an answer there, but were held after the first quarter to just a field goal. And we're once again sitting here talking about how long is Billy Napier going to last in Gainesville. I think the end is nigh, but we'll see how long this thing keeps on going.
Right. Graham, looking at this Florida team, going with the Texas win and then the A&M loss, I don't know enough about Florida this year. That's why you're here. That's why you're on the show. Is Florida a different team at home than they are on the road? Is that something that we can expect for the rest of the season? I don't know what to expect from this Florida team at all. They've been a little bit all over the place like they've been the last few years. Are they different at home?
Yeah, I think that most teams would say that they're better at home, right? The home field advantage is real. That's why fans spend their hard-earned money to show up. They know that they can make an impact on the games. That, that's not just catering to the masses or patting the fans on the back, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I absolutely think that an atmosphere like the Swamp, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, just like Tiger Stadium at LSU, Kyle Field on Saturday at Texas A&M, that place was rocking. Yeah. You guys have been up there. That press box sways whenever they play, the Rebel Yell or whatever it's called. It's real, absolutely. But with that said, you still have to be competitive on the road. You can't have a significant drop-off. And right. You certainly in this league, if you're going to achieve your goals, you're going to have to win some road games. After Saturday, Florida dropped to 0-14 on the road against ranked opponents under Billy Napier. That's just not good enough. He hasn't got a road win against an SEC opponent that finished over 500 in a game. They beat Mississippi State on the road last year. They were in it against Tennessee, went to overtime in that game after losing Graham Mertz.
Right.
They beat Florida State on the road, but that was Florida State that went 2-10. You have to beat a ranked team on the road for people to see that you are able to compete away from Gainesville. You can't just circle those home games at the beginning of the year and sit here and say, hey, we're going to win all these games and we can achieve our goals. If that's the case, you're going 6-6 every year if you're Florida, because you're playing one game in Georgia every single year against a really, really good Georgia team for the last half decade. So you got to win on the road. Florida is definitely a team that has a lot to be left desired when they go on the road. They're better at home. Go back to the start of the Billy Napier era. It started very promisingly. Utah comes in, and Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson makes some great plays, and Florida gets a ranked win in Billy Napier's debut over a really, really good Utah team. A year later, they go to Utah, and it was far from what you saw in Gainesville here. And that has kind of been one of the pieces of evidence used against the Napier era of why this thing's not going to work out, because you have to win on the road in this league, and Florida has not been able to do that consistently and hasn't been able to do it at all against ranked opponents throughout Billy Napier's 3.5 years.
Very quick follow-up. What's the best road win Billy Napier's had since he's been at Florida?
Man.
It scares me that you don't know it off the top of your head. That tells me a lot about Billy Napier.
Can I say the Gasparilla Bowl? I mean,
true road game.
Last year, a Tulane team that had so many opt-outs and, had their own end-of-the-year issues, and Florida plays in Tampa, kind of like a home game, right? But a true road win, I mean, maybe Mississippi State last year. It's hard for me to think off the top of my head, and that's a Mississippi State team that went 2-10 as well. It would have been Tennessee if Florida could have got the job done. That was one of Lagway's first games, one of his first road tests as well. You lose Graham Mertz, like I said, and Lagway got intercepted in the second half, which was critical. Florida couldn't kick a field goal in overtime. They couldn't get a stop. It would have been Tennessee if they had closed that game out, but there's no woulda, coulda, shoulda. There's no moral victories, like people say. So, man, I guess I'm saying the Gasparilla Bowl, or maybe I'm saying Mississippi State. There aren't that many of them, man. The list is not very long.
Wow.
Yep, I'm looking at the schedule right now, and the Phil Steele book. I can't find a win anywhere on the road against a ranked opponent. Nope, can't do it.
Steven, look at your book.
He fact-checked me.
He did. Steven turned into a fact checker.
No, I appreciate it. I don't want to spread any misinformation, but and Billy Napier's aware of the record. Where I'm not saying anything that he doesn't know. He knows that they've fallen short on the road, and he knows that, with all that said, how important the fans are. And that's part of one of the things that goes into this equation, the fan support. If you start losing fan support at home, and the money stops coming in here, that makes it really, really difficult to continue things. They say when you lose fans, you rarely win them back. And can it happen? Sure. You could turn everything around and win 6-8 games in a row, and people are going to start to have a little more optimism. But when you really, really lose a fan over an extended duration, it's tough to get them back.
Steven, real quick, looking at your book, what is the best win that you can see other than Mississippi State that Billy Napier's had on the road?
On the road, I don't see any.
True road game.
I really don't see any, because they've all lost the ranked opponents.
But I mean, was there a random win at Arkansas or at Kentucky or something?
No.
Wow.
No.
Wow. Okay.
And I was going all the way back to 2020, so no.
Oh, you went to Mullen, huh? You went into Mullen. Yeah, no, it's you got to win on the road in this league. And
Undefeated Dan Mullen, but we won't get into that.
Yeah, they don't want to hear that. And I think Dan Mullen's a funny guy. We'll see how long he lasts at UNLV before another job offer comes up that he likes. But
I'm sure Eli Drinkowitz is waiting to see what he's going to dress up for Halloween, though.
Hey, I kind of what we were talking about before this, man. Bring some fun back in to college football. You can do that stuff when you're winning, but you can't do, you ever seen the clip of, Dan Mullen smoking the cigar where he's asked where he got, I think, Nick Mullen's from, and he goes, UT Chattanooga.
Yeah.
You can be cocky and arrogant like that, and people eat it up. But the minute you start losing, that stuff ages poorly, and people sit here and say, oh, he's a clown. They have every insult in the book for you when it doesn't look good, because then they start thinking you don't take your job seriously enough, or you don't respect the opponent if you're dressing up after a win. You know, it's kind of like one of the breaking points for Dan Mullen, at least with a lot of the fans, was when the end of his tenure, Florida beat Sanford 70-52. And after the game, which was kind of embarrassing enough as it was, allowing 52 points, the most first half points the Gators have allowed in program history was to FCS Sanford, 42 points in the first half. After the game, Mullen, you know, everyone's got a phone these days, live streaming, going live on Instagram, and Periscoping was a thing. Mullen is filmed dancing in the locker room after allowing 52 points to an FCS opponent, where people were sitting here saying, hey, this is, most other coaches would be sitting here admonishing the defense, saying this isn't what we're built to do. This is not an impressive performance. We won this game because our offense hung 70 on the opponent. That was one of the final straws for people, where they were sitting here saying, all right, this thing is near its end.
Okay, Graham, let's get to the game this weekend. I know that Mississippi State is much improved this season. However, they were still a 2-10 football team last year, and they have still yet to win an SEC game under Jeff Lebby. If Mississippi State comes in and spoils homecoming, will that be the final straw for Billy Napier, in your opinion?
2 years since Mississippi State's won an SEC game at Arkansas, 10-7.
Yep.
You know, I think Jeff Lebby's going to do a good job there. That program's in a spot where they're rebuilding, and they're going to have to be patient. And those fans are proud. And Starkville, nice campus. And it's obviously you're competing against an Ole Miss program that's at a height for prospects, and you're in an interesting recruiting area too, where sometimes you're like kind of in South Big Ten country, where you're dealing with coaches being poached, coaches poaching players. Excuse me, I can't talk this morning. From your area, from all across the Big Ten as well, and the SEC. So it's difficult, but they've really improved their roster this year due to the transfer portal. That's no secret that if one of the biggest ways to turn into a contender overnight or vastly improve your roster is the transfer portal. You look at what Mississippi State did in the portal compared to Florida. Florida had single-digit transfers in the offseason, and I think only 5 are really playing a notable role for Florida this season. The portal is going to help you a lot. And this Mississippi State team looks a lot more improved. They've got an interesting offense. Blake Shapen is a talented quarterback. And so it wouldn't be a dismal loss at all whatsoever. To answer the question, though, if Mississippi State wins on Saturday and Florida drops to 2-5, where they're going to, in order to be bowl eligible, going to need to beat Georgia or Tennessee, or they're going to need to get 1 or 2 wins, and they play Kentucky, so it's certainly possible. But I would think, without being 100% certain, that if Florida loses on Saturday, that it's the end. I think we've reached that point, in my opinion, entirely. I could obviously be wrong. There are behind-the-scenes factors here, and who can really read Florida's athletic department right now. We thought this thing was going to be over last year at some point. So I can't say with certainty, but it would make a ton of sense, because also Florida is heading into the second bye week. And if you want to give an interim coach and the roster as much time as possible, you do it during a bye week. So if they lose, all the factors would align to me.
Graham, we are up against another break, and Heath, I know that you have a question. We will get to that on the other side of this break. You're listening to the Stingray Show, and the Florida and Mississippi State interview will continue right after this. And Heath, you can actually bring us back.
No, I don't want to. Yeah, sure. You ready? Welcome back, SEC fans. You're listening to the Stingray Show here on Tide 100.9. Graham Hall, covering the Florida Gators, is our guest. We're talking about Florida Mississippi State matchup that's going to happen this weekend. Graham, right before we went to break, you mentioned that you thought this was going to happen last year, Florida separating from Billy Napier, and it didn't. What is the one thing, or the few things, why it didn't happen last year? What did you hear? What do you know, since you're on the beat? Why didn't this happen last year of Florida separating themselves from Billy Napier and going out and hiring a new head coach?
I think there's a couple factors you could point to. I'm of the belief personally that you had a coach come in, and there have been so many changes in college athletics in the past 3 years. NIL, transfer portal has taken off. It was 3 years ago that guys couldn't transfer and play immediately. That's still a fairly new change in college athletics, but yet it feels like it's been here for 5-10 years now. That is absolutely a different aspect. NIL, collectives, firing a coach before the end of year 3 with all the changes going on doesn't feel like enough time in my mind. Even if you could sit there and say, look at the sample size, look at the 500 record, this is clearly not trending in the right direction. And Florida fans have pointed to the Jeremy Foley statement after the Ron Zook firing that if you know you're going to make a change, do it immediately. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's as relevant anymore, because most of these conversations with coaches are happening through back channels. And until 2 weeks ago, so going back to last year, if you fired a coach, the portal opens up for 30 days. So you're setting your next coach back. Even it's going to be harder for the next coach to retain the roster, to retain players like DJ Lagway and Eugene Wilson and Miles Graham and Aaron Childs, the impressive young guys on Florida's roster. So I think that's a factor of it. And then when you have all these resources invested in players, it's not just paying the buyout for a coach. You could be, in a sense, have wasted the money that your collectives use to bring in players. So it's a little bit more expensive than people sit here and say, oh, they got to pay a $27 million buyout or now a $19.38 million buyout. It's more than that. Now that rule has changed, where the portal's not going to open when a coach gets fired. It's going to happen 5 days after the new coach is hired, and it's 15 days. So that's a notable change that has happened, which has made it so that not firing Billy Napier has aged gracefully, in my opinion, when it comes to setting you up for the next coach, retaining players on the roster. I also think it's appealing, if you're an athletic program, to give a coach 3+ years, because the next coaches are watching that. This is a fraternity. They're seeing like, hey, Florida's going to, if I don't have the results, 2 years and 3 games into the season, I could be on the chopping block. It's my reputation. You get one reputation in this life. It could be me who people are admonishing and criticizing, and I could limit myself for future jobs. That's something that programs have to think about, because you want to be appealing to another coach. Yeah. So I think those factors as well, but probably the most significant one is, aside from the 4-game win streak to end the year, which certainly gave him some goodwill and got Florida to a bowl game. And, the biggest one is that the team didn't quit on Billy. Right. And when you lose the team, it's over. I mean, just like losing the fans, when you lose the team, when they're not fighting for you, when they're quitting on you as a coach, you see the writing on the wall. And to Florida's credit, to Napier's credit, to his coaching staff's credit, these guys didn't fracture. They didn't point fingers. They didn't blame each other. They didn't opt out. I mean, you see other programs that in October, if, they're 1-3, players start looking at the future. They start, looking at that red shirt as being appealing. They're starting to reach out to their representative and say, hey, where can I go next? That didn't happen for Florida. So the combination of all those factors is why 3 years made a ton of sense. But right. You've seen enough sample size now. You're seeing issues once again. And Florida is now off to the worst start in the Napier era, sitting at 2-4 heading into this game. And precedent makes it difficult to overcome Florida's current circumstances. Could they, in theory, go on a run and win the final 6 games and get to 8-4 and have the best regular season finish in Florida program and Billy Napier's history at Florida? Absolutely. Do I think it'll happen? No. And I think that Florida understands that, and that a change is going to be on the horizon in the near future because of that.
Graham, When we get into the X's and O's of Saturday's game at 3:15 Central, where are you most concerned that a rested Mississippi State team that is coming off of a bye week can take advantage of Florida?
Yeah, I think that for Florida, limiting Mississippi State's offense is going to be key. They're going to have a better start. They can't give up explosives. They have to communicate well and really use the crowd to their advantage. I think there's the intangible factor too of like two teams that are heading in different directions. Mississippi State is trending up. The program is hungry for success. They're looking to build towards year 3 and take it to the next level here. And Florida's players may see the writing on the wall, realize that they have no chance pretty much of making the college football playoff. If you go to ESPN's FPI, they got a 0.1% chance of winning the SEC. It's kind of like that meme from, Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance? What are the odds it happens, right? So they may see the writing on the wall, be demoralized, and not play to the effort level and the competitive nature that is required to win in the SEC on a weekly basis. But their offense with Blake Shapen is much better. They're good on the ground. They've got weapons at the skill positions. I think that this is going to be a little bit of a high-scoring game, honestly, on Saturday. I think that DJ Lagway is going to come out, look effective through the air, connect on some throws that we hadn't seen him make the first 3 weeks of the season. But I do think that Florida is going to give up some points to this Mississippi State offense, and you're going to have a little bit of a higher scoring game than you would tend to think in the SEC. So that factor alone, Blake Shapen and their offense is really intriguing and can be difficult to plan for and can catch you off guard in a lot of ways. So Florida's going to have to be on their P's and Q's, and I think it starts with stopping Mississippi State's offense.
Stephen has a question, but I got to mark off Dumb and Dumber on my bingo card before Stephen gets to his question. Okay, I got that off. All right, Stephen, go on.
Graham, you talked about the teams are in different eras right now. Think back to last year. Florida was the team that was trending up, and Mississippi State, the home team, was the one that was struggling, trying to find an identity. Now, this year, Mississippi State is the one that's trending up, and Florida is sitting there trying to find an identity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for Florida, last year that Mississippi State game was closer than I think a lot of people thought. They needed some explosive plays, and we're facing, Blake Shapen, I believe, was hurt before that game, and I think his season had ended. And so you're facing an inexperienced quarterback, and that was still, I think, an 11, 12-point game there in the fourth quarter. And, momentum and the intangibles of trending are very real in my mind. It's the belief that players and coaches have that this is going to be a step forward in the right direction. And when the path in front of you is hard to see, or you're walking with no purpose or running with no purpose, it kind of is tough to go full sprint in a sense. So I do think that for Florida, where these two programs are trending is going to make this an interesting game on Saturday. I do think the homecoming aspect, the pride of everyone coming back to the university, Florida has a lot of legacy players on their roster, from Miles Graham, Khalil Jackson, Ben Hanks. So it's not lost on the guys in the locker room what homecoming means, what representing Florida and competing in Gainesville and winning in the swamp, what that means. You got to defend your home stadium. I think that is going to be the decisive matchup here in this game. But if this game was in Starkville, I think the line is, 4.5 or something like that. So I think that home field advantage is real. Everything we talked about, and Florida's got to use it to their advantage on Saturday.
The game is 4:15 Eastern time. Kickoff is, heaven forbid, if Florida suffers a loss. Does Florida fire Billy Napier before midnight, or do they at least wait to give him Sunday?
I think they'd wait to give him Sunday.
Okay.
Frankly, I think it's embarrassing to a coach and to an athletic department to do this, how would I call it? Performative firing. You remember Herm Edwards getting fired on the field, years ago?
Yeah.
that was embarrassing to Herm, and it was embarrassing to the Arizona State athletic department. And he had recruited some good players, but they hired a guy who really had never been a successful college coach, certainly not in this era. And to put that makes it look like you're putting all the blame on the coach, when it's kind of like what Steve Spurrier said. It's not your fault for how you performed. It's my fault for putting you out there. When you're firing a coach, you do it behind closed doors. You do it with grace. You thank them for the work they put in, for handling the attacks on social media that, your kids are going to have to grow up and read, that your wives are sitting at home having to read. It affects their daily life. They're thinking about it when they go out and are in public. You don't make their firing public like that if you're an athletic director. Right. People still bring up, Lane Kiffin getting fired on the tarmac with, what was the AD's name? Hayden or something like that, passing him a note in first class, being like, see me after the game. They had gone 13-4 over their previous 17 games. Lane Kiffin was 31 years old, had a lot of, factors working against him, lost scholarships. I'm going on a little bit of a rant here. Lost scholarships. To embarrass a coach like that publicly, where it comes out there like that, I've heard people be like, oh, fire him in the tunnel if they lose on Saturday to Mississippi State. No, you do it with grace. You give them a day to go home, come back the next day, and then you have a sit-down conversation, thank them for the work they did. Hope you say that I understand that this just isn't working out. I wish we could have done more and things could have gone right. And you let them leave without their firing being in the public eye, or without you making an announcement after the game because that seems reactionary as well. I mean, if you're doing it right after the game, that looks like, you're kind of desperate. Yeah. So I don't like that. I hope that's not what happens. Sunday makes the most sense.
Yes.
Rather than Saturday.
Graham, as we walk out the door, the final thing I will ask you, Saturday in the Swamp, 3:15, Florida and Mississippi State. We talked about how the direction of both teams are going, who ultimately wins in Gainesville, and Mississippi State has not won in Gainesville since 2010.
Yeah, I do think Florida wins this game. I think they have more talent. I think that everything we just talked about with Napier, he's coached well when his back is against the wall. They beat Texas 29-21 last time at home, a Texas team that people are still trying to figure out. But you saw Texas against Oklahoma the other day, an Oklahoma team that, Heath, we were talking about it. I think they could win 9 games this year. And they, John Mateer is coming off 17 days removed from having hand surgery. So there were some factors there, but they beat a really good Texas team at home. Homecoming, the Swamp is real. Throwback uniforms, credit the fans. They'll still show up and cheer for the team, even if things aren't going well. That's part of why fan bases like Florida's, and they're certainly not alone, but that's why they're special, is that there are so many people that even if they're out on the head coach, they're going to show up and cheer, because they know that the players are putting their bodies on the line for the university, for the orange and blue, and they're going to cheer for them. So home field advantage is still going to be real. I think Florida wins a 10-point game. Like I said, I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring than maybe some people think, given where these programs currently stand in the SEC. I think Florida wins 31-21 on Saturday in Gainesville. But I'm prepared to be wrong. I've been wrong before, and it's not going to be the last time.
Graham, we don't have time to do a deep dive on this as we're wrapping up this segment, but I think this game comes down to Florida's run defense. Tell us about the defense of Florida and touch on the run defense, because I think that's where Mississippi State's looking to succeed. They can pass it, they can run it, but they've got some bruising runners. One might be a little banged up, might miss. What do you know about this Florida run defense?
I think Florida's front seven is really good. I think that they have talent at edge, and Tyreek Sapp and Cam James and George Gums Jr. I think the interior of the defensive line has been really good, given the injuries to guys like Caleb Banks, losing several players who are also banged up due to injury. I think it looks really good. Last week, Texas A&M did not run all over Florida. And yeah, they lost Le'Veon Moss early on in the game, but Florida's run defense was not the reason they lost that game. And go back to, a mutual opponent. The Aggies ran for 299 yards against Mississippi State before that game when they played them. Florida held them to less than half of that. So I do think their run defense is good. They're going to get to the quarterback at a higher rate. That's not going to be the reason why it's close. I think that Mississippi State is just going to be able to take advantage of a few unannounced plays and have some explosives in the third level. But it's not going to be, in my opinion, the run game that's going to gash them on Saturday.
Graham, look, man, thank you as always. I know that you have got to get to another show, so we will let you go. Good luck to the Gators this weekend. Catch up with you later on, and hopefully when we talk with you next week, we won't be talking about Billy Napier being on the chopping block.
We'll see what happens. It's always a pleasure joining you guys. It's always a blessing to watch football on Saturdays. I'm blessed to do it for a living. Looking forward to what should be a good game on Saturday. Talk to you guys next week for sure.
Thank you.
Brother, be good. And have fun at that funeral, Graham.
I will. Y'all take care out there.
All right. All right.
And for everyone listening, Graham made a joke. He's wearing all black. You couldn't see him. I know it's the radio. But he made a joke that he was going to a funeral. He's not going to a funeral. It was a morbid joke. We all laughed. Lighten up. If you came here to be serious, you're at the wrong station.
Wow. So, Heath, that is going to wrap up the Florida side of this matchup. On deck, behind the scenes, waiting to join us is Steve Robertson, host of the Boneyard and owner of Gene's Page over in Starkville, to cover Mississippi State in this matchup with the Florida Gators. Steve Robertson on deck with us right after this.
Maybe he was going to a Johnny Cash concert. Tribute concert.
Welcome back inside the Stingray Show. We just finished up with the Florida Gators and Billy Napier in the matchup with Mississippi State. And now let's turn our attention to the rested Mississippi State Bulldogs, who were coming off of a much-needed bye week after 2 losses to Texas A&M, and before that, the Tennessee Volunteers. And Heath, briefly, your thoughts on the Florida and Mississippi State matchup.
It's going to be interesting because both these teams have a lot of things going on off the field. You got some injuries kind of going on with Mississippi State. Florida, they got things going on of who's going to be our leader. They know the pressure's on to win, and they know if they don't, coach might be fired. So a lot of stuff going on off the field for both. So it's going to be interesting to see how this game comes out. Mississippi State has shown tremendous fight all year. I expect to see that again. Even if this game gets lopsided, I think you're going to see them fight very hard for a very long time. Florida, we kind of seen these guys quit a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be the interesting part. So what if Mississippi State jumps out and gets up 14, 21 points on them quick?
Yes.
Is Florida going to fold? What if Florida comes out red smoking hot? We've seen Billy Napier do it. What if they come out and get up 14, 21 points real quick? Is Mississippi State going to fold? I don't think they would. We've seen fight out of them all year. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think a lot of the things off the field will kind of creep in for one of these teams, and it'll probably be the team that ends up in the loss column.
All right. So to do a preview of Mississippi State in this matchup, here is Steve Robertson, host of the podcast The Boneyard and owner of Gene's Page in Starkville, Mississippi, to cover the Bulldogs. Steve, how are things with you in Starkville, and what is the latest on the injury information on the running back for Mississippi State, Fluff?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I don't feel as well rested as I thought I would feel after an open date. I do love watching college football, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people forget. We're fans of the game. And when there is an open date, you get to sit home. What a great weekend we had last weekend in the Southeastern Conference. So it's a great time for State to have an open date for all of us, but more importantly for Mississippi State. It's a little bit beat up, and Albert Reese, of course, missed the game against A&M. There is some optimism that he could play. A lot of that's going to depend on how things go in the end of the week. Isaac Smith didn't play. But Alabama bounced back. Tony Mitchell had a really good game for Mississippi State. His best game as a Bulldog without any question. So I think that gives you a little bit of cover if you need to hold Smith out for another week. And then Fluff Bothwell's not going to play this week. And that's really not a surprise to anybody.
Okay.
He said, Lebby, on Monday that he was doubtful. He's out. Okay, he's not going to play. We'll see how he looks next week.
Okay.
But it's not a season-ending deal, but there's not a firm timeline for a return. But Davin Booth obviously was the featured back last year and had his breakout game against Florida last year in the loss in Starkville. So, and then Xavier Gayton's a guy too that they're really high on. So I don't think that you're going to see a huge step back in the running game against Florida on the Mississippi State side. You'd love to have Fluff, but you've got some depth, probably the deepest room on the roster.
Steve, looking at this front seven of Florida, how do you think Mississippi State's going to attack it?
I think you're going to run off the edges. And, what's interesting, Florida's got 9 sacks this year. State's got 8, and so it's like if you're a Mississippi State guy, you're like, hey, we're not getting to the quarterback enough. Well, neither's Florida. If you look at the quarterback hurries and pressures that Tennessee and Texas A&M have put together against everybody, it dwarfs what Florida has done. Now, Florida may come out and have a breakout game this Saturday. We don't know. But they have not been able to influence the quarterback the way they normally do. And I think that's something to kind of consider. Now, State's got a bit of a patchwork offensive line without Albert Reese. You lose Blake Steen week 1 against Southern Miss. Albert Reese has now missed 2 games for 2 different injuries this year. Against A&M, they had to move Luke Work, who was the backup left guard, to right tackle. So the good thing is you've had 2 weeks to work with these guys and kind of figure out some cohesion and some chemistry. But yeah, that's a factor in this ballgame, is the fact that State's a little bit patchwork. And Florida's the more talented team. There's no denying that. But there's a lot of reports, even including one from Graham Hall, my compatriot with 247 Sports, that came out earlier this week, that the Billy Napier era needs to end. Those columns don't get written by accident. There's nobody in my profession that just jumps out there without a net and writes something like that. It just doesn't happen. It's kind of reminiscent, and you guys remember this, Rick Cleveland, the governor of Mississippi, journalism. Rick wrote a column before the Egg Bowl one year about the stolen alarm clocks and pillows from a hotel earlier in the year with Ole Miss, and that they were just kind of paving the groundway to fire at Orgeron. I mean, so when you start seeing the local media write columns about the ending of a coaching tenure, it's definitely worthy of your attention.
Steve, looking at Mississippi State and the bye week, besides the injuries, what else did Mississippi State need to do to get ready for the back half of that stretch of this season during that bye week?
Well, mainly settle the offensive line. That's really the main thing there, is settle the offensive line. We felt like with so many pieces coming back, because people forget this. I mean, you had Cannon Boone started last year, tore the ACL against Arkansas. Luke Work was a freshman, played admirably at left tackle last year. Jacoby Jackson's back this year. And then, of course, Albert Reese. So you returned 4 guys with a lot of SEC snaps under their belt. And then you went in the portal and feel like you've upgraded your talent. And Zach Owens, I think, has probably been State's most consistent lineman this year, transferred in from Colorado. He was a Phil Oldholt project last year in Boulder, and he's done some good things. And so it's been a little bit of a surprise, I guess, that this offensive line hasn't been better, but injuries have played a big factor. I mean, Timothy Lewis gets hurt against Southern Miss, misses the next week. Javen James, a guy they signed kind of hoping a redshirt, ends up playing every snap against Arizona State in a win. So it's just, you never know from one week to the next, what you're going to have on the offensive line. And I think having 2 weeks to just kind of settle that down is helpful. And Brennan Thompson was the guy that got a little bit banged up earlier. He's back to 100%. People say he's the fastest guy in college football. If you've noticed, State has gone with some 7-man protection and just kind of sent him on the fade and just throw it as far as you can, hope he can run under it. And that's been successful sometimes too. So I think that's an aspect too with Mississippi State. You've got to be able to hit some shots early to kind of soften up this Florida defense.
Steve, fun question for you. And yes, I'm asking you to predict the future. 6 games left for Mississippi State, 3 on the road, 3 at home. They're sitting at 4 wins right now. You're at Florida, Texas at home, at Arkansas, Georgia at home, at Missouri, and then the Egg Bowl with Ole Miss at home. Can Mississippi State get 2 more wins to close out the season?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, you never know what teams are going to look like when you play them, right?
Correct.
But I think if you look at the teams that are coming to Starkville, right? I think all those games are winnable in some respect, with the exception of Georgia. I think Georgia is much more talented than Mississippi State. But Texas has been very, very Heckle and Jekyll this year, right? And how's Arch Manning going to handle it? Because he's going to have people in the family texting and calling, and you got to win this game. We've talked about on this show before. I mean, the expectations put on that young man's shoulders are just ridiculous. I mean, you just got to let him be himself and let him figure this thing out, and he will. And obviously, a big win against Oklahoma. State's actually done pretty well against the running quarterback this year. I think that game is winnable, and certainly the Egg Bowl is always a toss-up game.
So, Steve, where do you feel like, getting back to this Florida game, that Mississippi State can take advantage of Florida?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think if you got ready to pick teams and you didn't know who was who, you'd still probably pick Florida's players more so than Mississippi State's. I mean, there's a talent differential that you got to overcome there. I think in order for State to win this football game, you've got to be balanced on offense. You've got to be able to run the football successfully, and State did last year against Florida, but you've got to be able to keep those linebackers honest. You've got to be able to keep those safeties honest. And so I think what State would love to do is go out and establish the run and then start pulling those safeties up and take some shots over the top. And when you get those opportunities, you have to hit them.
Steve, one thing I do want to ask you about the Mississippi State run game is it looks like Fluff Bothwell is going to miss. You've already mentioned that. You've touched on that here in this interview. Who else can we see? Because I know Mississippi State fans are chomping at the bit to see one certain freshman to get some touches. Will we see that this weekend?
You're talking about Kamario Taylor, right? I'm sure that's what we're talking about, is the quarterback Kamario Taylor. And I think a lot of people feel like that he has been somewhat underutilized, but I think people need to understand he is still a young man just kind to find his way. Athletically, is he good enough to play a lot? Yes. But he's playing the quarterback position. He's not playing wide receiver. He's not playing safety. There's a lot to that. And I don't know that he has the full command of the offense. He has a package. And people say, well, you mean to tell me there's not 6 or 8 plays? Yeah, I think you've got to play him situationally. You don't want to put too much on him. We've seen that happen so many times where young guy comes out and you put too much on his shoulder and they're never kind of heard again, from again. And so I do think Kamario will play, but it will be situationally, probably short yardage, red zone type situations, because I think you want to make account for the quarterback in the red zone when you have an opportunity to score. You don't want it to be 11 versus 10. And Blake is a guy that is athletic enough, but he's not the runner that Kamario is.
So, Steve, how do you see it playing out on Saturday at 3:15 Central? It is Mississippi State and it is Florida, and Mississippi State has not won in Gainesville since 2010. Your thoughts and prediction?
Well, we hadn't played there since 2010 either, if memory serves me correct. I mean, this is one of those crazy SEC snafus in the schedule. I mean, it's like that State and Florida play each other so irregularly. But, I think right now I would favor Florida in a close one. I like State to cover, but who knows what the headlines are going to read between now and game day. There's discussion out there that Billy Napier is going to get fired on Sunday, win or lose, and so how much of that is a factor? If you're a Mississippi State guy, and I am, you love the distraction, right? Because I don't know if Napier has anything, other media opportunities later in the week, but the fact that that's in the wind, and people say, well, players delete social media. Players know what's being reported and said. They know. And so that could be a huge factor. And listen, I don't buy into this whole homecoming thing. I don't buy into that at all. I don't think that has any influence on the players at all. I think that's just something that we like to talk about in the media. I can't remember the last time that we tracked homecoming wins and losses at Mississippi State. It just doesn't matter.
Right.
What's happening within the totality of that Florida program is what is on the minds of these players. Now, if they find out their coach is going to get fired regardless, how motivated are they going to be able to play? That's the thing that I think about it. And anytime that there is a distraction for your opponent, a lot of times there is the tightening of the game. So I won't be surprised if State wins this football game, but I'm not expecting it today.
Steve, as we walk out the door, I love to pick your brain about other things in the SEC. Please give us your thoughts on the egregious call in the Auburn-Georgia game the other evening with the touchdown, no touchdown there on the goal line for Jackson Arnold and Auburn, please.
Well, we may not agree here, but the one thing that I think everybody can agree with is this play was not officiated correctly. And I don't care what statements they put out. They can say whatever they want to cover. We have an officiating problem within the Southeastern Conference. We need to acknowledge that. First step in recovery is to acknowledge you have a problem, right? And for some reason, we are reluctant to do that. That is either a touchdown for Auburn or a touchdown for Georgia. It's not what we got. It's not first down at the 1.5 yard line. That's not correct. That's a bailout, lazy, cowardice way of handling that. When I saw it in live action, I thought it was a touchdown. The more times that I've seen the replay, I think the ball was moving as Jackson Arnold approached the plane, and the ball's punched out. So it should have been a 100-yard touchdown for Georgia, and they blew it dead. And how many times have we heard that? They're going to let it play out. Well, they didn't. And then you have this whole timeout situation. And again, I don't care what Kirby Smart says. I don't know Kirby. Of course, we've all been to media days and press conferences, and we've all shared the same oxygen. Kirby was calling timeout. Yes. And he's like, you can go lip read that. He's signaling and yelling timeout. And then all of a sudden we're clapping. So it's in that situation, it's either got to be a delay of the game or a timeout. It can't be a do-over. This isn't second grade football on the playground. This is a Southeastern Conference, man. And so you can't let a coach go up there and essentially cause a distraction. Do you really think they're going to call a penalty on Auburn clapping in the secondary with 1 second to go on the play clock because Kirby Smart told them that? And I got a tremendous amount of respect for Kirby. I do. And it's phenomenal what he's done. But nobody's doing Auburn any favors these days on the officiating side. And you saw John Cohen, my friend, and Hugh Freeze, not my friend, walk off behind Ken Williamson. And a lot of people, have a lot to say about that. And listen, I don't know that we need John out there, on the field in that moment. But, John and Hugh are fighting for their team. And I think in many respects, maybe fighting for Hugh Freeze's job. And the one thing that we should every team in this league and every team around the country, is we should be able to expect a fair and equitable officiating game, period. We should expect the rules of the game to be enforced fairly. And I don't know if that's really the case. And listen, I know people get upset with me about this, and I really don't care. But, man, Ken Williamson's crew always seems to attract some type of controversy. It always seems to be that when something like this happens, Ken Williamson's crew is in the middle of it. And I'm not sitting here, shooting daggers at Ken, but the reality of it is when you consistently have a crew that just can't get right, then you got to bust up that crew. You got to make changes. There are too many people that are incredibly financially and emotionally invested in the outcome of the football games in the Southeastern Conference. And so at the bare minimum, we should be able to go out there and have a football game and not expect to have all this drama and all this controversy.
Steve, I do have a question for you, big picture. Are you a fan of the idea of doing away with conference officials altogether and doing it like the NFL does with a pool?
Yes, I'm absolutely in favor of that. And there are a couple things I've written about this extensively over the years. I wrote an article years ago about refs lies and videotape, and really it was I thought it was to the detriment of Alabama football because Alabama was so great. But then week after week, we'd have some controversy. And Nick Saban and Alabama didn't need the help, right? It's like, what are we doing? There's always a problem there. I'm for a pool. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but the overwhelming majority of the officials in the Southeastern Conference are from the state of Alabama. And no matter how you look at that, the perception behind that is not a good thing. There's and so no matter who you are, where you're from, I think Greg Sankey, and I've spoke with Commissioner Sankey many times, wants to avoid impropriety, like even the appearance of impropriety. He just wants things to be even and competed on the field the way they should be. I think the last thing anybody in this league wants is to have consistent officiating controversy, right? I mean, there's a human element in all this stuff, but we talk about it just means more. If it just means more, then let's find a way to improve the quality of the officiating so we don't have these controversial moments, because it's not fair to anybody, and certainly the perception of the league when you've got, and again, I go back to that Memphis game. You guys remember that Memphis game when Martin Emerson kneels down and downs the football, and they allowed, and then you have the back judge coming up waving his hand so everybody on Mississippi State stops, and the kid from Memphis picks it up and returns it for a touchdown, and then, what do you know, State loses the game by less than a touchdown. The incompetence of that official affected the outcome of a ball game. And the fact that so many of us in the SEC know the names of officials is not a good thing.
Right.
Because if nobody knows any officials' names because they do a great job, right? You know their names because they've done something at some point that has impeded your team's ability to win. So if fans around this conference on the message boards know firsthand who's officiating and where, that's not a great look for the league.
No. Steve, Tony Barnhart completely disagrees with me. Mr. College Football says this would never happen. He thinks it's a bad idea. He thinks officials would quit. Which I was like, that might be the answer to solve this problem with officials. These players are making money. They're doing interviews after the game. These coaches are making money. They're doing interviews after the game. These officials are making money, but yet they're not being interviewed after the game. Not that we're going to interrogate them, but I think there should be a situation where the officials take questions after games. There may not be any questions from the media. There might be a million. But I think that would be one thing of accountability. And also, I think whatever's being decided at the SEC office should be live. I know other conferences do that, where they're talking about it. You hear them. They're going over it. Can we implement those two situations? Because the SEC brags about being the best. Hey, biggest stadiums, best players, best coaches, prettiest women, softest toilet paper, whatever it might be. But we got the worst officials. Is that something that we need to do, is let the officials officiate or take questions after they officiate a game and make the replay booth a live situation where we're hearing the conversation of what's happening?
Well, people who have nothing to hide nothing.
Exactly.
Right? And so the first thing I'll say is I don't think we have the worst officials. I think we have a few guys out there that probably taint things. But Heath, I've said this for 30 years. Let the white hat go address these things. Let's back up just a second. The SEC baseball tournament a couple years ago, we had this crazy call involving LSU. I can't remember who they were playing. But anyway, we go to post game, and you have the director of SEC officials come out and discuss the catcher interference, the balk, whatever, everything that happened, right?
I think it was A&M. Yeah, I remember this game.
But what a great job by the league, right? It's like, hey, we know that there's some questions about this, so we're going to get out ahead of it. And before we even bring the coaches and players in, what a great job by the SEC. That's a level of transparency that we need. And I've said it before. We ask a kid that's not even old enough to buy a beer, go face the media after they've dropped a pass, after they've missed a tackle, had their heart ripped out on national television. Their Twitter mentions are filled up with rival fans telling them what a piece of crap they are. We expect those kids to come in there. I think we froze up again.
You're fine. We're good on your end.
But anyway, I mean, the reality of it is we expect them, a teenager, to go face the media firing squad but the white hat has to go get into a running van and head off to Applebee's, for whatever he's doing, and they're too good to come answer and explain some calls. I don't get that at all. It makes no sense to me. The adults in this process should be the most transparent. They should be the most accessible people in this process. So what would it have hurt for Ken Williamson to go sit there and say, okay, here's what we saw. We talked to the replay official, and that's how we called it. When you don't do that, it paints a picture of impropriety and bias. It does. When they are no longer held accountable. And listen, the league has taken some steps to hold people accountable. I go back to the Jeff Batts situation, 2019 at Alabama, I think, when Shaheem Carter, who from Kentwood, Louisiana, covered that kid all throughout high school, love him to death, man. Dedrick Thomas is flagged for a phantom block in the back penalty, and it takes a Mississippi State touchdown off the board. Jeff Batts is pulling his flag out before it even happens. Well, the league took corrective action. Now, granted, we fussed about it, and I was happy to be shooting pictures that day, so we made all those pictures available. And so that there was, the league took action then. So there is some accountability for officials, but I'd like to see more transparency. And I think when you're asking people to help fund the freight now, everybody's got to give the NIL and everybody's paying a seat license and everything else. I think that there shouldn't be as much of this, man behind the curtain type thing. I think, again, I don't know what they're going to say on the replay, but I think when you're just like, hey, we want to get this right, because everything that's measured in life improves. Right. I mean, if all of a sudden you want the best officials and you pay them the best and say, but you know what, there's going to be a price for this. We're going to pay you better, but also we're going to hold you accountable. And listen, I don't want people going to social media doxing officials and that kind of stuff. But none of that, we can keep it between the lines. But I think our fans are owed a little more transparency when it comes to officiating in the Southeastern Conference.
Steve, look, man, as always, this has been a wonderful interview with you. Please go to Gainesville and enjoy the ball game for all of us. Hail State this weekend. Hopefully, we can croom, as we like to say, Billy Napier, because, Mississippi State has that track record of getting coaches fired, and we will catch up with you next week, okay?
I look forward to it. Matter of fact, I'm heading down to Theodore, Alabama on Friday night. I'm going to run by the shed and get some barbecue and go cover a great high school football game, and then we'll push on to Gainesville.
Hey, Steve, Xavier Gayton, we're going to see more touches out of him this weekend?
Yeah, I think you have to. I really do. And I think that's a good thing for Mississippi State, too. And that he's kind of an unknown element for the opponents. But, yeah, he's a guy that's going to have to carry the mail some this week.
There you go.
Steve, thank you. Be safe going to Gainesville. Catch up with you later on.
See you guys.
Take care, Steve.
All right, so Heath, that is going to wrap up Steve Robertson, host of The Boneyard. Really do want to thank him for joining us to give us insight on everything. And Heath, tomorrow evening, the Stingray Show has no show, oddly enough, on Thursday evening, because we are in the middle of college football season. It is the third Saturday in October, and stupid basketball is being played and aired, so we will not be having a show. That's so crazy, man, that we are in the heart of the college football season and somebody wants to run basketball.
You call it stupid basketball. Is that a league? Is that like pro basketball? Is that?
Come on, man. I mean,
stupid basketball. We failed the test, so we have to play on the stupid team in the stupid league and play stupid basketball. Steven, man, why you gotta hate on basketball?
Dude, that's for November, December, January, February, March, and April. Come on now.
I get what you're saying. But yeah, stupid basketball. No, man.
I mean, seriously, man, this is the heart of college football with the third Saturday in October of Tennessee, Alabama, and we're having to resort to basketball? Come on now.
I am with you. I know. I know that basketball, some people love it dearly, but the rest of us love football.
Correct.
And
Amen to that.
but I do understand, and there's bills to be paid, and there's agreements being made, and we're not in those conversations. But yeah, it is what it is. I'll say this: I don't dislike basketball, but I usually don't start paying attention to it until like the week of Thanksgiving. Like, hey, basketball starts, or basketball's been going on. Let's check in with everybody because after this weekend, I got to be ready for basketball. Yeah, I usually wait till like the third week of November before I start even looking at basketball.
Amen to that. So we will catch you on the Friday evening edition of the Stingray Show. Basketball takes precedence over the Stingray Show on Thursday evening. So we will be back on Friday with a preview of Arkansas and Texas A&M, and that game is on campus for the first time in a long time, as it is no longer in Jerry's World, the Cowboy Stadium. So we will be previewing the Aggies and the Hogs of Arkansas when we return on Friday evening at 6 p.m., and we will catch you then.
That's a terrible decision, by the way. That game should stay in Jerry's World in Dallas.
And we will discuss that in its entirety on Friday evening.
You could disagree with me, but you're going to be wrong.